Thank you for being with us today at Hospitality Talks. I'm your host, Abid Butt. Joining us today is Philip Weghmann, the Chief Development Officer of Preferred Travel Group and President of Beyond Green. Philip is a visionary hospitality leader with more than 20 years of international experience across global luxury brands. Prior to returning back to Preferred Travel Group, he served as global brand leader for Marriott International's luxury collection, where he steered the global brand strategy and growth for over 120 iconic hotels. Good morning, Philip. Thank you so much for joining us today at Hospitality Talks.
Good to see you, Abid. Pleasure to be here with you today.
Amazing, Philip. I know there is lots to be talked about. So if you don't mind, we'll get straight in. Would you mind sharing your personal journey? What attracted you to this industry that you have had a wonderful trajectory in industry that both of us love and enjoy?
Yeah, happy to give you a quick summary. So, my parents both traveled a lot. My father was an executive in the steel industry and traveled a lot, especially into Asia. Took us with on some trips. Sometimes spent longer periods of the year over in Asia. My mother was and still is actually in her late 70s now, a travel agent, a high-end travel agent, and specializes in far-flung places like South Africa, Australia, Argentina. And to this day, it takes small groups of people onto these very special, highly curated trips. So she also traveled a lot, and I went with her on a number of trips. And so this was all part of my life from early on, right? I just grew up traveling a lot. And then, as a teenager, I started traveling on my own as soon as I was allowed to. Did a lot of traveling. Was fortunate that I was able to go into a lot of places at a young age, and it completely changed my worldview, obviously, as it has for so many of us that have done this. And then sort of the next level, the evolution of this was to not just go somewhere for a week or 2 weeks, but to actually really live in other countries and get the full immersion and experience. So I've done this many times now. I've lived in 7 different countries over my life and my career. 5 different European countries, South Africa for a few years, and then also the States now twice. I'm back in the US now for our second stint.
Fantastic.
And that's really how I ended up working in this industry, because if you love travel, at some point it becomes sort of a natural thing to find a way to work in this industry, and no regrets.
Oh, that's amazing. Philip, it seems like you grew up from a very young age traveling and experiencing different destinations. What is your earliest memory of a hotel that as a child you walked in and absolutely you were blown away?
Yeah, so I grew up in Europe. I'm German. My parents are German. I was raised by a German father and French stepmother. And in Europe, as you know, there's all these grand hotels. Many of them are being reborn at the moment under new ownerships. I grew up going to some of these hotels. Not always necessarily to sleep, but to have coffee or tea or a meal. And so those are the earliest memories, going into these kinds of hotels in Munich or in Paris, and just being fascinated by the activity and the theater that was going on.
Oh, stunning. Now, you are in the travel industry as a hospitality professional. Not only that you travel for business yourself, your hotels look after a lot of business travelers or travelers that are vacationing there. Do you think, is it easier to coordinate business or leisure travel from professional perspective?
For the hotels to execute, you mean?
Yep.
Yeah, I think business travel is probably a little bit more straightforward, because they come for very specific reasons and usually have things to do in the destination that don't depend so much on the hotel. Um, Even though there's a lot of leisure travel these days, right?
Yep.
So it's hard to sometimes appreciate what's really going on in the mind of a traveler. I was in New York 2 weeks ago, and my wife was actually with me for one of the nights, and so my agenda and my expectations were not your straight business trip expectations. But I think leisure is harder. It's longer stays. People come with, especially in the luxury segment, come with this expectation and desire now to be transformed in just 2, 3, 4 nights. That's really hard to fulfill for the hotel. So I think the vacation travel, personally, I think that continues to be harder to execute. You have them for longer, so you can touch them more, which is good. More touch points, more interactions, but it's hard to live up to the expectations.
Fair enough. You have a very interesting role with Preferred Hotel Group as Chief Development Officer and at the same time President of Beyond Green. As a chief development officer, your deliverable would be the portfolio growth. As a president of Beyond Green, you possibly looking at very stringent criteria to make sure that the consumer experiences what Beyond Green is meant to be. How do you balance the two? Whereas I'm sure the pressures are to grow the portfolio, but at the same time maintain the ethos of the brand.
Yeah, great question, Abid. Let's talk about Preferred a little bit first, and then about Beyond Green. So, Preferred Hotels and Resorts is the brand we're most known for because that brand has been around since 1968. So, a lot of people sort of just know that brand, but it's actually part of Preferred Travel Group for many years now. And there's a few other brands, branded programs, and a full blown consulting division as well called PTG Consulting, which I also try to help grow. And on the preferred side, yes, we have goals and we want to grow the portfolio. We still have a lot of areas with real gaps and with real potential for portfolio growth. So we're very focused on growth without a doubt, but it's really always at the right balance between volume and quality, right? And that's a little bit different from how the major chains look at growth, right? Where it's all about net unit growth and just uh, the numbers matter more than anything. Our growth is always probably a lot more intentional, thoughtful. And in fact, I also oversee Preferred's quality assurance program. So that combination makes me extra motivated to also uh, watch very carefully for what kind of hotels we're bringing in to each collection and how we evolve our portfolio. Um, and that's a bit of a unique setup. In most hotel brands and companies, you don't really have the head of development also looking after quality assurance. They tend to be, separate areas with push and pull. And in our case, we've decided to now house them both under me. Um, and then Beyond Green is a whole different world, right? Beyond Green is a community and a hotel brand, but um, above all, it's a community of leaders in sustainable hospitality, and it now has about 70 hotels, 70 members. Some of the most famous hotels out there are in Beyond Green. From Post Ranch Inn in California to Bermejo in New Mexico to all the and beyonds in Africa, to Three Camel Lodge in Mongolia, where I'm headed very, very soon. It's a portfolio of hotels that are mission led for the most part. It doesn't mean they don't want to make money or and want to be profitable. Many of them do want that, and they are, but they are mission led, they're purpose led, and so is Beyond Green, right? So the way we look at growing that brand is very different. The hotels need to meet a very comprehensive set of luxury standards, but also sustainability standards and community standards.
Sounds good. That's a great segue. Let's pivot to talking about luxury and evolution of luxury consumer. There are lots of different lenses that are put on the luxury positioning, and to be honest, at times it's used a little loosely or casually, in my opinion. Can you talk about what does luxury mean to you, and how have you seen the definition of luxury hotels evolve over a period of time, keeping in mind what the consumer is looking for and what do they deem as luxury?
Yeah. So it's definitely evolved. The word is complicated these days, right? So many brands, companies, hotels just um, overuse it constantly. But the clearest sort of change has been that it's still about the physical product and the design, but it's a lot more about the level of service, the experiences and the programming, or the experiences come through the programming, and then access, right? Access to unique experiences or moments that are only possible in that destination and through that hotel, right? I think that is what travelers nowadays have, the highest expectations, and that's how they um, evaluate a hotel, before and then certainly after the stay. Did it really surprise me? Did it really give me something that I could not have experienced if I had stayed at that other hotel that I was also looking at? I think those are the things that are truly at the forefront these days. Obviously, as you go up in price point, everything else still needs to be really amazing too. The physical product needs to be great. Um, but the truth is, as you go up and you go into the $1,000 a night kind of hotel category, which there is a lot now since the pandemic, a lot more of, as we both know. Um, the people who stay in these hotels, the majority of them, they have really nice homes, probably multiple homes. And is the hotel going to be that much nicer than what they have in their home? Probably not. So it's not about that, right? It's about having amazing staff, that is not just well trained, but incredibly um, anticipatory and personal. And it's about great programming and truly sense of place. And the independents do it probably the best because they're usually rooted in the destination differently, because they're owned differently. We have plenty of hotels that are owned by big institutional owners, but a lot of them are owned by smaller companies, family offices, or truly still one family that has had that hotel for 3, 4, 5 generations. So it's just a different commitment from those owners to their hotels and to their destinations, and that then comes through in the guest experience.
So, Philip, you are absolutely correct. I guess independent hotels have some liberties that maybe brands by default might not be able to avail themselves of. When you are discussing with owners and with developers about your group of hotels in your portfolio, what is the economic business case that is most attractive to the owners these days? Talk a little bit about how is the return on investment in hotels these days is working, keeping in mind that we have seen a massive bifurcation in the industry where Uber luxury is doing extremely well, where some of the more mainstream hotels are not performing quite as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, happy to speak to that. So first of all, preferred, the world that I live in now, um, goes from ultra luxury to upper upscale, right? So our 625 hotels in that portfolio kind of stretch the whole way. and are positioned in different collections to make that easier to understand for our travel advisor community and also for our end consumer guest traveler. And that's a really great advantage to have, because that way the travelers and the advisors always find something within our portfolio at the right sort of price point, because not even very affluent people don't always want to go and spend 1,000, 2,000 a night on a hotel, depending on the purpose of the trip. So I think that is a big advantage for us with our portfolio. Your question around why do owners come with us? First of all, there's so many hotels out there in the luxury space and so much pipeline coming, right? There's probably enough for all the players at this point, right? And everybody is getting a piece of the action, and all the brands are growing nicely. So there's just so much new luxury consumer coming into the market every year. Between 1 and 2 million millionaires are being created, added every year. So that just makes for pretty healthy demand, and so everybody, I think, is that is in the luxury space is doing pretty well. But owners love the independent space, especially hands-on owners, because we allow them to be hands-on, right? We give them a lot of the things that they need to compete as an independent, but we don't really interfere with a lot of the business um, at property level that they're so good at, and we don't want to get in the way with that. We give them really freedom and flexibility, right? Our contracts are usually a lot shorter than the big chains, but they're franchise agreements. We're talking 5 years versus 20 or 25 years. So as an owner, you're preserving that flexibility and freedom to do what's best for your asset in these changing, fast changing, turbulent times. I think owners love that with us. And then we give them a lot of the infrastructure, commercial infrastructure that they need to perform well, but they remain in charge for a lot of the decisions, which is what they really appreciate.
Terrific. Well, look, in many ways, and you brought up earlier, luxury has to be something that I don't make use of every single day. A typical luxury consumer, their houses are palatial, possibly. They can get the best of the best things. So, from an execution and delivery perspective, particularly when there are lots of luxury brands that are coming in, from execution point of view, how do you deliver those unique experiences, unique moments that these consumers yearn for, these consumers travel for?
So our hotels, obviously, are all doing that on their own, right? We have very little to no brand programming, brand signature programming that we force upon the hotels. We just really gather all the great things that they put on and tell the story, right? And group them together into sort of buckets, and then tell the story on the PR side, and that's really, really important for AI visibility, and we can talk about that a little bit later, right? But everything, all the experiences are really being curated by the hotels. We support them with research. We just put out a big trends report last year, which was very well received by many different audiences. But our hotels also lean into that because they love, obviously, the big picture. They want to understand, where the world is headed and the industry is headed in terms of trends. We put on great conferences where we have the right speakers speaking to our hotels about that. So we're more the body that educates them, and the hotels then take all of that information and use their freedom and their independence locally to create things that only they can create in their local markets, right? Without any limitations, restrictions, imposed by a chain. That is not our role. So that's really I think how how to best sort of explain or define our role as the brand and the corporate office, if you will, and all of our member hotels around the world.
Well, I think this will be a great time to possibly discuss some of the trends that you have noticed. You talked about the report that you recently generated after some research. If you were to look at top five trends within the luxury consumer that we need to be aware of, that is pivotal in the future, what might that be?
Yeah. So one trend that stood out is that even though a lot of new um, inventory is coming into the markets all over the world, a lot of it is very beige, right? It's very much. It looks like something people have already seen before, and that is not exciting to the luxury customer. So beige, we termed it beigification, and that is something the luxury traveler is running away from. Right? They don't want that. They want truly unique, memorable, colorful, surprising experiences, and so we think we're pretty well positioned to capture that with our hotel portfolio. Um, Another one is heritage travel. You know, nothing new. We've operated Historic Hotels of America for almost 20 years now. It's a brand here owned by the Trust of Historic Preservation in Washington D.C. But we actually operate that brand, and we've known that for a long time. There's a huge affinity group that travels specifically to see historic destinations or destinations of historic relevance, and then they love staying in places, hotels that are historic. And so we're very present in that in that segment, in that niche. It's a really exciting one, and it seems to be growing. You know, there seem to be even more people wanting to understand history, not just by reading about it, but actually living it and staying in places that have that historic significance. So that's one that comes to mind. One that's definitely up there as well is secondary and even tertiary destinations, right? And not just beautiful nature and remote places. That's also obviously growing significantly since the pandemic, in particular, because people started to appreciate nature in a very different way, and that continues to be strong. But even on the city side, right, a lot of the major cities have become so busy, so crowded, right, and it's a problem for these cities, and we read about it everywhere, right? They're struggling with it. They want tourism, but they want a little bit less of it. Then you have all these secondary, tertiary destinations, many of them really interesting places. They want more tourism. And so that shift is happening. And I think it's a really good thing for all parties. It's good for the destination that has too much. It's good for the destinations that has too little. It's good for the traveler because they're going to see something a lot more authentic probably, and can experience a destination where they don't have to book every site and every restaurant like a month in advance, right? Which is really what it has become for a lot of the great um, bucket list tourism destinations and cities out there. It's really become a little frustrating how you have to plan everything in advance because it's just so many people going.
So, Philip, you talked about the popular destinations, and I'm sure we can rattle off quite a few where there is an influx of tourists that go there. There has been a lot of conversation around the quote unquote anti tourism in some of these destinations where they want to bring it down. Also, the movement about regenerative travel, where the goal for the travelers is to leave the places possibly better than that when they visited. So it's no longer do less harm, possibly doing better for the destination. Travel and tourism does wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things all around the world. It's an industry that grew even at the depth of financial crisis. How does the industry balance that? What have you seen that the consumers are demanding as a must have from purpose led travel or regenerative travel, or balancing this to your point so that we don't have to make a reservation for dinner 6 months in advance, possibly even before I make my flight booking.
Yeah. So obviously, your question brings Beyond Green top of mind, which I will talk about in a minute. But also, the majority of our hotels around the world, even in the big cities, they're really um, thinking about this topic um, um, very proactively for years now already, and are doing amazing things to make sure they're not just sitting there in their communities and the impact is potentially negative or contributes to over tourism only. They're really trying to preserve the fabric of what makes their neighborhoods and their cities so special, right? I was just with the GM of the Royal Lancaster in London. I was with GM of Villa Copenhagen in Copenhagen a few weeks ago. Both of these are great examples of hotels that are truly part of their community, and they're doing everything they can to preserve also the smaller businesses around them and make the hotel a good host, right? So that is definitely happening more so than maybe 5-7 years ago, where many hotels just wouldn't care too much, really. Um, on the resort side, and a lot of our Beyond Green members are resorts, the majority are resorts at the moment. It's definitely also that happy encounter of good host and good guest, right? It's mission-led hotels, as I said earlier, that are part of Beyond Green, and they want to do everything they can to preserve the destination that they're in. And so it's not just running your hotel efficiently and protecting, the environment. It's really Beyond Green has three pillars. It's environment, culture, and community. And culture and community is all about, your neighborhood, your destination around you, protecting that land and that ocean that makes your destination so special. So the Beyond Green members community in particular is very dedicated to that. And we are obviously the global collective that tells their stories. So that the good guests feel good after leaving the destination. They feel like, hey, I've been here and it, spend a lot of money here, and a good portion of that is flowing back into the community, and I'm not contributing to this destination community being worse off as a result of my stay or as a result of the hotel being here. So all of that, I think, is coming together more and more.
Terrific, Philip. Can you reflect on geographical shifts from these purpose led travelers or luxury travelers? Where are the most desirable spots where people are being welcomed for this kind of traveler? And also a bit about the demographics. Who is this consumer? How do we attract these consumers and their likes and dislikes within the hotels and destinations that they visit?
Yeah, so we see obviously great growth of affluent traveler everywhere. Ultra luxury, that top 1% sometimes is actually less important in my opinion than we sometimes make it. Those travelers only fly private and need so much privacy. They're just going to be on their yacht and on their in their private homes that they've rented, and so sometimes they're not necessarily actually what we need for our portfolio and our group of hotels. But just under them, obviously, so many affluent people. It's growing in the U.S. The U.S. continues to be, the biggest market by far, but China, India, Brazil, Mexico, all key markets for us where we see great increase in affluent travelers who are traveling outbound and outside their region as well, right? Not just intra-regionally, like close to home, but really all over the world. And then a good portion of them is showing great interest in what we have in the Beyond Green portfolio, because they tend to be bucket list destinations that are worth traveling a little bit farther for. We have Beyond Green has a partnership with And Beyond, which has most of its portfolio in Africa, and those are perfect examples of these incredible journeys that are once in a lifetime and very desirable for people, and at the same time places where they know they're contributing to positive change for the communities. So all of that is kind of tied together. The one other thing that's I think very interesting is, and that's why luxury is so healthy. Luxury travel is so healthy. Um, it is not something that you do once or once a year and then you're satisfied. It's sort of it's addictive, right? And if you had one great experience with your family, you're already planning the next two. It's not like buying a sports car and then it's diminishing returns. And we see that a little bit when we look at the earnings calls and the results that some of the luxury companies have posted over the last year or so. They're struggling a little bit. Not all the brands. Some are doing really really well, but some of them are struggling because people are not quite as excited about handbag number 18, car number 7, watch number 10, right? And travel is just very different. It works very differently. You're having one amazing experience and you're literally already thinking about the next, right? So this demand wheel just continues um to spin, and that's what's driving a lot of the demand from our perspective.
Well, also, do you think it is a demographic shift? Because obviously, boomers had lots of consumption around things, whether it was house, car, whatever the case might be, whereas millennials are more into experiences. Also, COVID introduced a totally new mindset because all of a sudden, post pandemic, people had realized that life, unfortunately, can take many different turns. So experiences were important. Have you seen any other event that would have caused this spike in travel?
No, I think that is for sure one of the major reasons that triggered some of what we're seeing now, right? Initially, there was a revenge travel where people were just paying whatever to go wherever almost. I think that's flattened out a little bit. That's softer now. But people are not postponing these bucket list trips as much. They're really going for them because the pandemic has changed the way we think about the near term future and what might happen. You're right. Also, the boomers are still huge spenders, right? They're healthier. Um, and still traveling strong. But then right behind, you have the next generations all the way to millennials and even Gen Z. Now starting to influence where certain trips go and where to stay. So um, what's interesting there as well is we see that they start spending on really nice hotels and travel much earlier, right? They're not wealthy yet, but they're already spending more versus a Gen X um, who, in general terms, waited much longer until they were truly wealthy and had savings in the bank and owned their first house, and then started to really indulge and splurge on luxury travel. The younger generations are doing it, maybe not 10 times a year, but they're doing it on a regular basis already at a pretty young age, even though as a percentage of income, they're not as wealthy yet, right? So we're seeing that. And that is all without this massive transfer of wealth fully having happened yet, because that's also coming now. Obviously, the biggest transfer of wealth is
Yep.
coming over the next 20 years or so from the boomers into the younger generations. That's going to be huge. A lot of it, from what I'm reading, is going to go into female hands who are major drivers and decision makers of hotel choices, travel and hotel decision making. So it's going to continue to fuel, even more activity from these younger generations. Yeah.
So, keeping that in mind, that the younger generation will, before too long, start contributing tremendous amount into travels. Is there anything that destinations can do to better attract them? How do we manage the convenience paradox, whereas we are trying to market the cultural element and trying to expose some of the very unique experiences. But from a traveler perspective, that might mean that I have to like get out of my comfort zone and really truly be able to experience that. What can destinations do? What can the industry do to prepare ourselves better for the younger generation and their demands?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's not all about technology, right? And in fact, we're seeing there's a strong desire for high touch and human service, human interaction. So it's not all about digitalizing the whole experience, right? Obviously, your digital um, experience, in the research phase and in the booking phase, that has to be top notch and seamless, and that's definitely changed from generation to generation. But then once you're there, I think it's ironically um, the same playbook, um, maybe a little bit differently executed. But I do think hospitality is what a lot of them are craving, because the rest of their life is so highly digitalized and convenient now. And so what we're seeing in research is that the hotels are uniquely positioned to give them these things that they're actually not having in their day-to-day life, and be that counterweight, counterbalance to the highly transactional, super convenient, but very transactional day to day, from the morning coffee that you pre-order on your phone to the Uber that you order through your phone. Everything is just so transactional and digitalized. The hotels kind of offer a completely different experience. And so I don't know that they need to, the really good hotels, I don't know that they need to completely rethink their approach to programming.
Okay. Well, we very briefly touched on technology in an era of artificial intelligence and all the conversations that everybody is having, including hospitality industry. What has changed and what can we anticipate moving forward in terms of attracting the consumer in the age of AI? What is different today?
So I think that, again, the playbook hasn't changed. The platform obviously is changing, has changed over the last 6 to 12 months in a dramatic way, right? Something we haven't seen in decades. And all of a sudden, it's not a search; it's a conversation with the various language models, and then short lists are being returned, right? And to be part of that, the hotels just really have to um, get the right content out there and get a really consistent story out there, not just what they're putting out there themselves. That's only about 15% what the language models value, what the hotels are saying about themselves. It has to be endorsements from other sources that are considered, high authority or highly credible by the language model. So the story needs to be very consistent across their own website, their network, right, which is us for a lot of these independent hotels, the press and the media, and there has to be enough volume out there too, enough content. But I think if hotels get that right, they can continue to remain very visible, and I think um, it's actually a potentially really good moment for independent hotels. There's investment that's needed. Certainly on the brand side, we're investing heavily. We're the first independent brand to launch our own app within ChatGPT and then into the other language models, so that people who love our brand can just search there and bypass the OTAs. So that's a big investment that's coming. The hotels, I think, are well positioned because AI is looking for these one-to-one recommendations for that particular person, initiating the conversation with them. And so they want to put forward something very specific, very memorable. They don't want to give a short list of places that are just cookie cutter and too generic, right? And so that is where the opportunity lies to continue to be relevant or visible to the younger customers and not just the younger customers. I mean, the shift over to the language models is all generations. This is really absolutely fascinating. Doesn't, by the way, mean travel advisors will all of a sudden be no longer needed. We thought that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We've said that many times. The great travel advisors are very, very important and doing really, really well and close partners of ours. And I think even with AI, people will still want to verify a whole lot of their trips with their trusted travel advisor. They might do their research differently, but I don't know that you will book a whole lot of trips directly out of the app. Maybe that one night trip to New York where you go for a very specific meeting or purpose, but a longer vacation, you're still going to verify that with an advisor or friends or your network.
Well, today there appears to be a huge trust gap in use of technology, as I understand that the demand for travel advisors, particularly in luxury space, is at an all-time high. So it is an interesting dynamics, and as technology improves, I'm sure there'll be further shifts coming down the pike. Philip, I know I've kept you here quite long, and there is lots more to talk about, but we are approaching the end of our session. Just some quick fire things, short answers, whatever comes to your mind first. When we talk about luxury, what's the first word that would come in your mind?
Time.
Okay. What's the most overused word in hospitality today?
Probably luxury. The word boutique also comes to mind. That's problematic these days.
Okay. From your professional and personal lens, Philip, what's one thing the hotel has to have to really get your attention?
Very broad question. City has to have a great gym and great room service, and resort has to have a wellness, well-being offering. Does not have to be a spa, but it has to have some offering, some programming where I can work on my wellness while I'm there.
Okay. Well, from sustainability and regenerative travel point of view, what is a quintessential unique amenity that these hotels can provide that is only available in these types of hotels?
Oh my God, they're all so different. I mean, obviously, one criteria for Beyond Green is you have to eliminate single-use plastic, right? Including obviously plastic water bottles. So the classic amenities, you just get a really nice bottle that you then refill at various stations around the hotel, around the resort. That's sort of your quintessential no-brainer. And then for the rest, the hotels are just very, very unique with what they give you, what they provide. Hard to answer.
Okay. Last thing, from destinations around the world that are trying to attract this younger consumer, new consumer, trying to provide these unique experiences, what have you seen around the world? What's harder to preserve? Is it the natural ecosystem or being able to preserve the local cultural facilities and cultural heritage?
So both is extremely hard, right? And both probably requires an effort across the private sector and public sector. domain. You can be, if you're a resort somewhere on the ocean, you can do everything in your power to keep everything clean and pristine. But if near you there's a town and pollution contamination happens there, you're going to be affected. So it's really that partnership, private public sector, and same really for preserving the fabric of these especially smaller towns. There's quite a few great examples of smaller towns who are just keeping the chains out, whether it's fast food chains or any major chain retailers. I personally love that. I think that is a really great way to preserve the character and the local communities and the smaller businesses. But that's a concerted effort, usually by many other actors, not just the hotel itself.
Fantastic, Philip. Thank you so much for joining Hospitality Talks today. I'm sure we will have you back before too long because one conversation is not long enough to talk about everything we wanted to talk about, but really appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure being with you. Good to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you.